A couple of years ago, I went to a rehab in Southern California for alcohol and Xanax addiction. My family and friends were beginning to worry about me a lot, so if anything, I did it more for them than for me. Being there for almost 4 months, we all got pretty close. However, disaster struck and my roommate decided to hit the needle again. Needless to say, that was the last time he ever would, as he overdosed in his apartment, collapsed in his closet with the needle still in his arm, and this is where some friends and I found him, motionless. We called 911 immediately, but it was unfortunately too late. A few weeks passed and we are still living in the same apartment that he passed away in. Being newly sober and not really knowing what sober people do with their lives all day, we do a bunch of random stuff to keep our minds off of our old habits. This night we decided to use a Ouija board. We all sat in the living room and began. We said the prayer, put our hands on the planchette, and started asking routine questions and got nothing. About to quit, someone had the brilliant idea of going into our friend's room that passed away. Sitting in that room, we pulled everything out again, redid the procedure, and asked for, let's call him Brad. We asked, Brad, are you still with us? Amazingly, the planchette went to yes. Both a little freaked out and a little excited, we continued. We asked simple things like if he was okay, etc. All was okay until we asked Brad why he did it. The planchette went to B-A-D-G-N-E. We thought about this for a while and asked, Brad gone? Planchette rapidly went to yes. Who is this? We asked. Nothing. Angry, I screamed, who the fuck is this? Planchette started moving like I've never seen it move before. Z-O, 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 over and over again. I had no clue what the fuck this was, but I turned to my friend and his face was white. When the planchette finally came to a rest, I asked my friend what was wrong. He stammered, we need to quit. We need to stop this now. Being a huge tough guy, it was strange to me that he was so scared. Stop being a pussy, I said jokingly. That's Zozo, a Ouija board demon. He pretends to be a friend or a family member and finally reveals himself. I took this in and kind of chuckled to myself. Oh really? That friend took off and went back to his apartment, while two of us stayed taunting the demon and cussing him out. We finally asked what he wanted, and the planchette shot straight at me. Terrified, I asked, what do you want with me? It took in the directions of H, E, L, L, respectively. I stated, you want me in hell. It shot to yes. Are you going to kill me? The planchette stayed at yes. Getting a little freaked out now, I asked, how are you going to kill me? F, I, R, and the planchette shot towards one of our candles, knocking it onto the floor and starting a small fire on the carpet. We quickly put it out, and as we were doing so, looked towards the last letter the planchette landed on. E. F. I. R. E. Looking at this, we said goodbye on the Ouija board and burned that board the same night. I refused to sleep in that apartment after that night, and broke my sobriety soon after, going back to my home. So Zozo, I hope we do not meet again. When I was 8 years old, my family moved into the house I grew up in. It wasn't an old house and no one had died in it. It didn't even feel creepy, just an average suburban house in your average southern suburbs. The first time anything really happened in the house, I was about 9 and had lost my last tooth. Still being a kid, of course, the tooth fairy was expected. So when I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a figure standing in the middle of my room, I assumed it was the tooth fairy. It was bald and only about 3 or 4 feet tall, about the size of an average child, standing completely still in the middle of my room. I remember my parents telling me that if I was awake, the tooth fairy wouldn't leave me any money, so I rolled over and went back to sleep. When I got up the next morning, I excitedly told my parents that I'd just seen the tooth fairy the night before. I described what I'd seen, but they told me it was just a dream. For the next several years after that, I continued seeing and hearing minor things in the house. When I was home alone, cabinet doors would open and close. I'd hear dishes moving around the kitchen or catch movement out of the corner of my eye. The most common was often at night. I'd wake up to see a young woman hovering over my bed. She was dressed like the Rosie the Riveter character from the old posters from the 1940s, with the red and white bandana around her hair and a denim shirt. When I would see her, she'd stare at me for a few minutes and then slowly float over my body and out through the wall behind me. I was never afraid of her though. When I was about 12, my parents divorced and it was just me and my mother living in the house. By the time I was in my late teens, my mother was already home and my house became the hangout for me and my friends. Most nights everyone gathering to play Dungeons and Dragons or something similar after work. One night we were hanging out but didn't want to play, so I pulled out a Ouija board I'd picked up at the local toy store a few weeks before, wanting to try it out of course. We sat in my room to play with the lights out and the door closed, and it went pretty normally, nothing crazy happening for the most part. The only strange thing that did happen was at one point we asked something like, "Show yourself," and at that point we heard the front door open and close and heavy footsteps come down the hall towards my room. The handle of my door started to turn, and one of the guys jumped up and locked the door before it could open. But we didn't hear anything else, and no footsteps moving away from the door. Nothing. And after a while we turned on the light and opened the door to see if my mother had come home unexpectedly. The house was empty and the front door locked. We decided we'd had enough of the game at this point and put it away, and everyone went home. A few weeks later we were hanging out at my house again, this time playing Dungeons and Dragons though. One of the girls that usually came had to work late and had classes in the morning, so she said she wouldn't be coming that night. While we were sitting in the living room to play, at around 2 in the morning, suddenly we heard footsteps run across my wooden front porch. It sounded like someone very short or a small child running quickly. Everyone in the room heard it. We had a conversation as to if our friend had changed her mind and had just arrived, as she was very short and it made more sense than a child running through the neighborhood at that time of night. When she never came into the house, we all got up to look and there was no one outside and her car wasn't in the yard. Her boyfriend, who was with us, gave her a call and verified that it wasn't her, as she'd just arrived home on the other side of town and was headed to bed. Around this time, the activity in the house picked up. I saw shadow figures with red eyes, often in the living and dining room of the house. I heard footsteps and other noises at all hours of the day or night. I started waking up in my room to see hooded figures standing near my window and door. It was around the time that my half-brother, who I was close to, passed away. It was sudden, and I hadn't seen him in years as he'd gotten into drugs. My mother had decided to keep me away from him because she didn't want him to be a bad influence on me. After that, I'd wake up hearing his voice saying my name in the middle of the night. On a whim one night, I sat down and typed out a letter to him on my computer. It was in my bedroom since I was home alone, and I was bored. Now this computer was hooked up to an old dot matrix printer, one of the really loud kind that makes all kinds of racket when it's running. After I wrote the letter, I felt silly for it and deleted it without saving, printing, and I shut down the computer before I went to bed. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up and my bed was soaking wet. At first I thought my puppy had peed on the bed because he was too small to get down, even though he was housebroken and I'd taken him out just before bed. I got up to let him outside and to change my bed sheets when I realized the wet was just water. It was more than a tiny puppy could have made. On my way to take my bed sheets to the laundry room, I passed the bathroom in my hallway and noticed that the light was on, even though I turned off all the lights before bed. There sitting on the counter was a picture from the kitchen, with the inside still wet. When I was really young, my brother used to wake my sister and I up by throwing water on us because it made me laugh. When I got back into my room and started making my bed, I noticed a piece of paper laying on top of my printer. It was the letter that I'd written to him and never saved or printed. The computer was still shut down and the printer was off, but it had been printed out, torn off the printer, and laid on top as if someone had read it. Things like this continued for a few years when I lived there off and on before turning dark shortly before I moved out of the house for good. The hooded figures appeared more often. I woke up one night with the feeling that I was being stared at, only to roll over and see what looked like a rotting corpse a few inches from my face. And one night woke up to a hooded man standing at the foot of my bed with my bedroom door open when it had been closed before. He held up his hand and a ball of blue light appeared in his palm, which he threw at my face. He and the ball disappeared just before it hit me. But the room was so cold that I could see my breath on a normally hot southern summer night. When I was in my early 20s, after I moved out for good, I had one last experience in the house. My mother hadn't been in the house in months and was preparing to sell it. I told one of my cousins about the things that had happened there throughout the years, and he decided that one night out of boredom, he and a friend would pick me up and we'd do some ghost hunting in the house while it was empty. We each had a camera, and he had a voice recorder that we bought. We set the recorder in my old bedroom and spent an hour or two wandering around the house taking pictures. When we were done, we came back to my room and sat and listened to the recording and discussed all of the nothing that we'd found. On the recording, we could hear our voices moving from room to room and talking about how my cousin's friend's camera had a sexy shutter sound, and the fact that my camera stopped working almost as soon as we'd walked in the door. About 20 minutes into the recording, we could hear all three of our voices echoing from the other side of the house, and a deep voice that sounded like it was right up against the microphone on the recording spoke, "Get the fuck out!" and we immediately obliged. I found out the last few years that my mother had actually experienced several experiences in that house, with waking up to find an older man in his 50s or 60s looking through her closet, or seeing him just wander around the house. When she'd say anything or get his attention, he'd turn around and just look at her, and then vanish. She always thought she was just dreaming or something, but with everything I saw over the years at that house, I can't help but think it was maybe something else. This happened in October of 2004, back when I was still a third-year high school student. My friends and I stuck around the school late at night after our annual Halloween party. We'd agreed to try out my friend's Ouija board. It wasn't the brightest of ideas, but we needed a thrill. We found a nice spot under a huge gnarly tree and proceeded with our half-assed ritual. There were 5 of us, 2 boys and 3 girls. We were all expecting some kind of paranormal contact. Rumors had it our school was haunted, but we've never really experienced anything firsthand. And it was Halloween when all the spirits came out to play after all. We all wanted to get spooked, also we've never seen a Ouija board firsthand before, so we were all pretty excited. Our school was an old Spanish colonial house built in the 1800s when the Spaniards still occupied the Philippines. We were in a section of the school that doesn't get used often, located beside a creepy old Jesuit house. People only go there when they needed to use the restroom, store equipment, or one of the sheds, or to make out with their boyfriends or girlfriends. We sat down in the middle of an open space with only an exposed bare bulb illuminating the surroundings. We were all having a laugh, scaring each other with what-if scenarios. It was your typical dumb kids doing dumb things. My friend who brought the Ouija board proceeded to place it in the middle of our circle. If I remember correctly, it was the glow-in-the-dark version, which we all found hilarious. But it gave us the ability to see what was written in the dark anyway. Not knowing what to do and going after what we've seen in movies, we all proceeded to place our index finger on the top of the planchette. We sat there looking at each other, until one of us said, "What's next?" We didn't know if there was a proper way to start the ritual, plus the board didn't come with instructions, so we decided to just throw in a question. "Is anyone there?" I called out into the darkness. "If there are spirits living here, please talk to us," one of the girls joined in. We clearly had no idea what we were doing, and still, nothing. Not even the slightest bit of wind. One of my friends jerked to the planchette, and the girl who brought the Ouija board screamed, breaking the silence. We all laughed at how ridiculous it was. After a bit of joking around, we decided to give it another go. We all placed our index fingers on the planchette once more and asked, "If there's anyone there, we would like to make contact." "Don't break the circle," one of my friends jokingly said. "Shut up," I whispered. We were just about to get ready to give up when the wind started to pick up. The stillness broke and the darkness around us just seemed to move. Just a coincidence, we thought. "Okay, don't break the circle," I yelled out. "Is anyone there?" I was excited. It was like a scene from a movie with dirt and dead leaves swirling around us. "Guys, I'm scared," my friend sitting beside me said. "My mom warned me about playing with forces we don't know." "Did you die here? Were you killed during the war? Are you the headless priest that roams these halls? Do you know Jose Rizal, our national hero? Are you a hottie?" My friend giggled. At this point, we were all throwing random stupid questions. And nothing. "This is bullshit. I don't want to do this anymore," my friend said, exasperated. We were all thinking the same thing. Just then, a group of dogs from the neighboring house started barking at us through the chain-link fence. These 6 dogs were growling and showing teeth. We were all screaming and, without finishing the ritual, bottled right out of there. We didn't see each other until after Halloween break, and this is where the story gets creepy. One of the girls told us about a weird experience she had the night after playing with the Ouija board. She had gotten home late after hanging out with her friends from the neighborhood, when she realized she forgot her keys to her house, so she called her brother up, who was then still sharing a room with her. And what he said crept the hell out of her. He swore she was already home. He claimed to have seen her walk in a while ago, and that she looked really tired and swore her head straight up to bed. Creepy, but no need to freak ourselves out, was all we thought. Besides, her brother must have just been tired and seeing things. But then my other friend started telling us about an encounter she had that Halloween night. She was going up to her room when the light started flickering as she was ascending the staircase. Your typical horror movie visuals. Shrugged it off to faulty wiring. But just then she saw the door to her room open, and a dark figure stepped out and stood atop their staircase. She couldn't make out the entity's face, but she recounted that she couldn't move and felt utter dread as the figure stared down at her. "No way!" my best friend, who just joined in the conversation, said in disbelief. "Something happened to me as well." He recalled that he was sleeping one night when he woke up feeling really uncomfortable. He described his vision as having TV-like static and feeling a heaviness surrounded him. He looked around the room, and that's when he saw a bloody, charred face with piercing red eyes grinning at him through the window. I couldn't believe what I was hearing because I almost had a run-in with death that night too. After the ritual, I was sleeping in our sedan on the way home after fooling around with the Ouija board when I felt our car jerk. I woke up instantly. Looking out the window, I found out that we'd been hit by a huge oil tanker. I panicked and leapt out of the car. Luckily, my mom and I survived the crash, since the front of our car was a total wreck. Still, I don't have any explanation why those things happened to us, but thank God nothing happened after that. I never played or gotten near a Ouija board ever since.